So we got a pretty cool guest today, Dr. John Iverson. He's caught more turtles than anybody in the history of the world, it seems like, and done some really cool stuff at his property, hasn't he, Troy?
Oh, it's awesome. I've got a little sneak peek of the slideshow that you're going to show us, and the ponds he's dug and the way he's done it, which blows my mind. Some of them by hand is just amazing, and the work he's doing with reptiles and turtles and amphibians and all the stuff he's doing in those little ponds, which a lot of times we would probably call them mud holes, but man, the life they contain inside of them is just crazy impressive.
It is, and he did it. He actually got paid by the government to do it. That's pretty amazing. And
CRP programs are awesome. That's great.
He's going to show us how you can dig a pond and lake on your property for free and get a lot of crazy wildlife alongside of it. Welcome to Sitting Dockside. This podcast is for people who dig ponds and lakes as much as we do. On this podcast, we're going to bring the most knowledgeable people from all over the country, talk about wildlife, fisheries, lake construction, lake management, sit them down, hang out, and just talk some shop. I'm your host, Matt Rayl. I've been working with lakes and ponds for over 20 years, and during that time, I've picked up on a ton of tips and tricks from lake and pond owners all over the country. So if you want to learn how to catch some smiles for your kids and grandkids off your lake, or how to grow some memories off your pond, then come sit with us here. That I am just excited to have. It's Dr. John Iverson from Earlham College. Well, you're retired now from Earlham, so how do we introduce you from there?
Technically.
Technically. Yeah, but you've worked, we brought you in and we're going to talk about something a little bit interesting, and it's going to be with ponds that may not have fish in it. And a lot of people are going to be like, what? Why would you dig a pond without fish? I know Troy's kind of introducing, and this will be a kind of a foreign venture for him. But then also you purchased some land, and we want to talk about how you worked with some government agencies and got some funding and done some work, and where you started from and where it is now, which is pretty astounding. And you actually got some ponds dug with some funding from that sources too. And so this is going to be pretty interesting. And then finish up with some pretty amazing things that you're seeing in your ponds that you may not see them with fish, or in some areas that actually dry up, and it's contrary to a lot of people's thinking. So, John,
Yep.
Tell them a little bit about yourself. I'm going to work on here and try to get some images up too, that you can see on the Facebook or on the website, and then talk about a little bit what you've done and your background a little bit, if you would.
All right, I'll do that. Well, as Matt said, I was a biology professor at Earlham College for 33 years, and so technically I've been retired for 9 years now, but I'm still working, still active, and I'm a herpetologist. So I study herps, that is reptiles and amphibians, and these images show the two main groups that I work on. I work in western Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere, on turtles. That's on the left, and then on the right, I work in the Bahamas on the Exumas, and I work on giant endangered iguanas down there. So either one of these guys could take your finger off. So you got to be a little bit careful. Yeah. So that's my professional, I guess, identification in terms of research is with herps. But I mean, I love all reptiles and amphibians, and you know, I like wildlife in general, and including fish, of course. And so I always wanted, for the first 20 years of teaching at Earlham, I always wanted some property, places where I could have lots of wildlife. And so back in the mid 90s, I bought 2 chunks of land. I don't know if you can go to the next picture. This is in eastern Indiana, right at the end of where the glaciers moved south. And so just south of me is where the terminal moraine is, where it gets real rugged and rocky, but it's still pretty flat where I am. And so you can see a 1993 plot that we bought, which was wooded at that time. It was kind of overgrown with invasive species, and I've been working to clean them out. a lot of dead trees, a lot of Osage orange, bad stuff. And then 4 years later, to the left there was a cornfield, and it was terribly unproductive cornfield. And I thought, hey, I bet I could transform that. And so we bought that too. And in both cases, we went into debt pretty far initially to buy that. But I'll jump to the punchline here. At this point, I'm several tens of $1,000s ahead because of taking advantage of government programs to pay for various things. And one example of that you can see in that in that lower left-hand corner. Now you can see the aerial of it. You can see the ponds that I put in. Took it out of corn, and then brought in a bulldozer and dug those bigger drainages. You can see the erosion, where the ravines were starting right in the cornfield. And my goal was to stop all water from leaving the property. I love wetlands, fish, amphibians, waterfowl. I wanted water. And so I dug with a bulldozer 10 of those bigger wetlands, but I only put fish in one. So I'm going to warn you there. And I can't do a pointer here, but well, there's a house in that little. Yeah, you can't do a pointer. Anyway, one of those ponds has fish. It's up near the house, so that people can come and catch bass and bluegill and whatnot.
And it's one of your bigger ponds that have the fish too, if I remember right.
Yep. Yeah, it's the deepest one. It's 8, 9 feet and spring fed and all that. But so I hold a lot of water. So I put those in, and then flip to that next picture that you showed. This is about 1998. So this is a year after we put the ponds in. You can see several of the big ones there. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess I can see 8 of them. And those are up to half an acre. But the biggest one there, that's sort of to the right center, is the one with fish in it. All the rest of them, all the rest of the wetlands I have do not have fish in them. When we started here, there were no wetlands on the property. Well, that's not true. There's a little stream way back in the woods, but no standing water. It's just a small stream, so you've got some minnows in it, and that's about it. But anyway, so this picture, you can see the lines kind of going from the upper right to the lower left. We put 40,000 trees out there in rows. And so I wanted to build a forest. I wanted to make a wildlife refuge here. And I really wanted to have a lot of amphibians. And so that's why we put the big ones in. And so again, just kind of to jump to the end here, the next picture shows, this is basically, before and after. This was last year. That's the same view. Yeah. And you can see those ponds, you can almost see the ponds, but things have grown up quite a bit. And now I've got to, I got to start on a forest. It's still got a ways to go, but I'm making progress.
Let me ask you some questions.
It's amazing.
Yeah. For the viewers, or for the guys that can't see the images, basically what we're looking at is a cornfield, and then a series of small quarter-acre ponds and 40 acres, quarter to half-acre ponds, and then you planted some trees. You said 40,000 of those trees. Yep. They planted them into the watershed around the ponds, and then how did you buy all those trees?
Well, that's a really interesting thing, because it was in corn, and it was poor field. It was poor field. It was a ground that had been abused, and so I dealt with the Department of Agriculture and got into the Conservation Reserve Program. And that's a federal program in which you can take land out of production. You agree to do that for at least 15 years. And what they do is they help you plant it in trees. So they paid half the cost to putting those trees in. So, I don't remember the exact amounts, but including the machine for planting all the trees and the trees themselves from the state nursery, a branch of the local Department of Natural Resources, one of the ecologists there, came up with some money. He paid for half of the bulldozer cost for putting those ponds in. So right off the bat, I'd only paid half the amount for this. Then the second thing is, once it's in trees, and of course the other piece of the property was already in trees, Indiana has a program called the Classified Forest Program. and you can take land and put it in that program. And once it's registered, you agree not to cut trees, not to take the trees down. You can't put a road in, you can't build a house, you can't destroy the woods, so to speak. And if you do that, if you make that commitment, they drop your property taxes. So we bought those 2 pieces of land, and when we did that, we put them into the classified forest program. It cost us $5 a year total for property taxes for those 2 pieces of property. So that's $10 a year we've been paying for whatever 20 some years. That's it. I mean, if we left it in farmland, if we did anything with it, we'd be paying out the kazoo.
Right.
So,
how did you find all the resources?
I did a lot of research, and of course this was before you could just go online and do it. You had to go talk to, I talked to the local DNR guys, Department of Natural Resources guys. I went to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Soil and Water Conservation Service office here in town. Actually, one of the district foresters for the state is located here in Richmond, and I went and talked to that guy. I mean, I did a lot of talking before I made any of these steps forward.
How would you, if somebody was going to start the search, how would you tell them to?
I would go look up take your phone book. Maybe people don't have phone books anymore.
Yeah, iPhone you, Matt.
For government offices, but look for the U.S. Department of Agriculture offices near you. Probably just put USDA and your zip code in, and it probably would kick out the nearest office. Right. And then the thing to do is to go in and talk to those folks and just say, hey, and you can do this for fish, for ponds for fish. They do mostly ponds for fish. In fact, when I was doing these ponds, I had to do some talking because they wanted to make these all fish ponds. And there are certain specifications that the government has. They have to have deep sides, that sort of thing. They have to be pretty deep. And I like to have, for amphibians, not so steep a side. And I don't mind, cattails and that sort of thing along the edge. Anyway, you can find that office and go and you can talk to them about cost sharing for trees, for ponds, you could put a prairie out here. So you got to talk to your USDA guy.
Okay, start there.
Yeah, so we did the farm that I live on, John. My father-in-law did a similar process years ago. It's a CRP program, but it was intended to keep cattle out of the creeks here, and they paid for the majority of the fencing to do that. And then between the creek and the fencing, we went in and we hand planted, I don't know, a bunch of trees. It must have been 10,000 or so that we planted, and same type of deal. And then also you were talking about the land conservation deal that y'all have there. We have a land trust type of deal in Tennessee that's very similar to that. Once you agree to it, you get a huge tax credit, obviously, and it's a great process if you intend to always keep the land just the way it is. And we see a lot of people in this area doing that.
Yeah, the other thing I didn't mention is that CRP, for you taking that land out of production, they pay you. They paid us $100 an acre every year. So, I get my check on, automatically deposited for $3,600 for this piece of property, $3,600 a year, and I don't do, I go out and walk the forest and catch amphibians, and I get paid for it. So wow. After 23 That's years awesome. Times, that basically paid for the land. So, and you mentioned that land trust. The thing I hadn't mentioned yet is that we went the farthest, the last step in this whole thing is we put all of this in a conservation easement, which is, as right. you described, with a local land trust, we registered with them, we encumbered the deed. And what that means is that property can never be developed. You can never, right. we had a whole long line of stipulations. It's in the deed. Nobody can mess with it. It's a federal law. And so you can't put a road in here. You couldn't drive a bulldozer through there. You couldn't build a building in there. You can't mine anything, sand, gravel, anything. You can't cut live trees. And we made a long list of, can't drain any of the wetlands. a long list of stipulations. And as you say, we got a huge tax break. I didn't pay any federal taxes for 3 years when we did that conservation easement. So, and as I said, everything, this is all, we're money ahead at this point, and got 76 acres to enjoy.
Wow.
It's beautiful. The transformation over 23 years is incredible. You've just got some, I mean, what's the largest caliber tree from what you planted, which was obviously small? What caliber tree is like the biggest now?
Well, and I don't know if you can see the picture that was just up there. Can you go back to it? Yeah, over to the left, the pond to the left, on the left-hand side is the dam to that pond. Whoops, come back, one more.
Now go to the 2019 image.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. One more, forward.
Okay.
There you go. The pond to the left, you're jumping. Go back one.
Right there.
It just, oh, I see. It takes a while. I got you. Okay, yeah. So the pond on the left, you can see how tall those trees are to the left of that pond. Those are cypress trees. And so I planted a bunch of cypress in low spots. Cypress is not native right here. It comes up to southern Indiana, not far south of here, but they do really well here, particularly along wetlands here. So I've got some cypress there that are probably, they're approaching probably 20 inches diameter breast height. So we're talking big trees, and they got,
wow.
The knees that they have, they kick up, they got knees coming up everywhere. So it's like going down to Louisiana or someplace.
So that's literally my favorite. Taxodium is my favorite tree. And yep. So that's probably what, a 40 foot tall tree probably.
Yeah, it's at least, the tallest one's probably 50 now.
Wow.
So most of those are, say, 30. There are some places though where, and from that same pond that's on the left there, if you kind of go 45 degrees up to the right, you can see some openings in there. There's an opening where you can still see the forest floor, if you will. Those are places where this highly eroded ground was so abused by the farmer that the topsoil was gone. And even after 23 years and me replanting and replanting, the trees won't grow there. There's just no nutrition in that soil. And so those are the places where I've gone and now that the forest is closed over, and I've gone in and added small wetlands because the trees won't grow there. Usually what it is it's solid clay. It gets real soggy in the spring, and the trees just can't grow. I mean, it suffocates the trees. Then it gets dry as heck, like brick, in the summer. And so I've gone in and put additional wetlands in.
What's the area that I'm seeing down to the right hand corner? Looks like it's an opening next to a small pond with some rows of stuff there.
And you can see the tree lanes are those rows that you see. That was a place where when I started this, I put a Scotch pine, a little chunk of Scotch pine there, like about 200 Scotch pines. They grew fantastic for the first 15 years. They were 40, 50 feet tall. And then the Scotch pine disease that we have took them out. They all died within the last 3 or 4 years. I had to go in, cut them all down, chop them all up and burn them to keep that, I guess it's a nematode from being passed on to other trees. And so now I've replanted that, and that's what those rows are. So I put a whole bunch of new little small trees, and it'll take another 20 years to fill them in. But it's like the ash tree. There are a lot of these trees out here were ash trees, and I knew once the emerald ash borer came, they started dying right away, and I started cutting them down so they wouldn't compete with the other trees. So now basically there are no ash trees left out there, which is unfortunate because they're fast-growing, beautiful trees. But in this part of Indiana, we won't have any ashes in probably 2-3 years. Just it's terrible. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. There's a lot of firewood out there right now.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Right. So yeah, as for the listeners here, what we're seeing is a progression or succession of growth of some trees from small. You put them in there from basically you started the trees, they were like 2 feet tall. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now
Or
some of
even
them are already
less.
50 feet tall, 40 feet tall in 23 years. And actually 98's when you started. I helped you plant a few of those trees.
Yep, I was going to say that when Matt went to Earlham, in case you didn't know that. So he was a student of mine. And so, back the time, I guess his graduation year, I hired him to come and help me plant trees out here. So some of these things are here because of him. So
yes,
kind of nice.
I'll claim that.
My dad did that to me the first year I worked for him. I had to plant a bunch of pine trees, and I was like, I don't remember signing up for this.
Yeah, there's nothing fun about it. That's for sure.
This just shows the same thing, same view, 4 different times. Pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and if you guys want to get a little bit closer look at it, we'll put this the visual file onto the website, and you guys can go to look at it and see the pictures in the forest succession if you're really interested. But now we're getting into ponds. You've dug some ponds with some equipment, and then you've done them a little different too than most people.
Yeah. So as I said, there were no wetlands on this property. As of today, if I counted them right, there's 44 wetlands. That is
Okay.
Ponds, impoundments of some kind.
And a wetland is basically what I think when I hear the word wetlands is like a real soggy area with a bunch of vegetation. But you're actually saying you're calling your wetlands just an area, a little tiny pond that holds water for a portion of the year. Is that right?
Yep. And some of these ponds are tiny. Some of them are probably 10 feet across, and you wouldn't believe the production in a little pond like that. And then they go all the way up to the ones you saw, like third to half an acre. But this is one of those spots where you can see the trees in the background growing pretty well, but right where this machinery is working, all the trees there never grew. I replanted them, they would not grow because this soil right here is so heavy in clay. And so I brought in, and you can't get a bulldozer in anymore because of the tree lanes, but you could get one of these little mini excavators in there. And so this guy, I hired him, and you can see we're digging this pond, and it's not like your typical fish pond. Basically, we just scrape away the edges. You can see the incline along the edges, real gradual, not steep banks, real gradual. So that frogs and stuff, salamanders they can crawl right down in and crawl back out. They don't have to try to climb a mountain to get out into the forest. Anyway, with this little excavator, we just dig it away and pile the dirt around a dam. And you can see the dam starting to form in the foreground here. And then not very deep, I prefer these ponds to be ephemeral. That is, my goal is to have them dry up in, halfway through July to August, maybe sometimes if it's a wet year into September, but I want them to dry up. Partly because that keeps fish out. And I know that's probably what you don't want to hear, but fish and a lot of these amphibians don't get along real well. The fish eat,
sure.
eat all the amphibians, and that doesn't work so well. So that being ephemeral like that, it also breaks the bullfrog cycle and the mosquito cycle. I said 44 wetlands. We have virtually no mosquitoes, because every one of these is full of salamander larvae and tadpoles and all kinds of insects and invertebrates. And so despite all this, we have almost no mosquitoes. And bullfrogs, as you probably know, bullfrogs take 2 years to develop. The eggs are laid 1 year, but then those tadpoles have to overwinter in permanent water until the next year, and then they transform into little baby frogs. And so bullfrogs eat all these other things. They'll eat the other frogs. They'll eat the salamanders. They eat anything. And their tadpoles are big, and they outcompete the little tadpoles from the other things, the salamander larvae. So I try to keep the pond so they dry up, and that breaks that cycle. And I still have millions of bullfrogs, and they move in here all the time, but it's not enough. It keeps the population down, keeps that. Bullfrogs here are native, but they're kind of like coyotes in some places or raccoons. There's too many of them, and if you keep them down managed, then they don't do a lot of damage. And I like to hear bullfrogs too, but they can get out of hand. So anyway, this is a go ahead.
Yeah, well, we were at the hatchery. We get a mess of bullfrogs every year, and then Troy, last time we were doing it, we were on our third frog, and she was kind of big, and we opened her up, and we opened her up, and a little tiny turtle came out of the belly and rolled across the tailgate, rolled down the way, took off running.
Yeah,
it must have just had a meal. Yeah,
right.
I just never thought about bullfrogs eating turtles.
Yeah,
I just never thought about it.
In his belly. But John, you got a method of gigging bullfrogs that is unconventional. What is it?
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but you know, I've got some trails out through this plantation, and I mow them, and they go across the dams of some of those ponds. And 20 years ago, you know, I'd go out and I would try to gig the bullfrogs or shoot them to try to knock down some. Because there were so many adults out there, and I got a friend who loves frog legs, and so I give them to him. And anyway, I went along there on my little John Deere riding mower along the dam, and the bullfrogs 2 feet away just sat there like I was a giant bullfrog or something. I don't know, the noise, the vibration. Oh, I turned around, I came on by, they sit right there. So the thing is you can drive right on by and gig them or shoot them, anything you want, and they don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, so he gets
it's really curious.
He doesn't even get off the tractor.
That's something that I don't think I've ever taken my kids frog gigging. And as a child, I grew up, John, with airboats everywhere I went because the career that my dad had, the career that I have now too. But we'd get on airboats and go to these big lakes and just tool along the edge with a spotlight and a gig. And I'm talking about, it was some of the funnest things I ever did as a kid was gigging them big bullfrogs. So
yeah.
I remember, with the red worm and a fishing pole and hand it over to the tip of it and catch them on the fishing rod too. But
they'll eat anything.
Yeah, I was laughing when you told me that you never got off your seat and you had a mess of bullfrog legs. Yeah.
Well, I've been driving across the dam there mowing, and I'll spook up a vole or some small mammal, and it'll go in the water and start swimming across the water to get away from me, and up comes a bullfrog and eats them. I've had it happen a dozen times. Yeah, they'll eat anything that moves. So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And a bullfrog and a green frog, they're very similar. Are the green frogs just as bad?
No, the green frogs are not as bad. They don't get as big, and I haven't found green frogs with other things in them. You know, other frogs or other turtles or whatever. They don't seem to be as bad, and they're not as dense. So, as you know, bullfrogs, you can have 1 billion of them in a pond. I mean, just out of control.
Right.
So they eat everything.
How deep? Go ahead, Troy.
No, go ahead, Matt.
How deep are these ponds? Did you say?
Again, most of the time, most of them are only 2 feet or less. Those great big ones that I bulldozed initially, they're probably 4. That might be 5 feet. But they mostly, like every other year, they dry up as well. And if we have a couple of wet years in a row and the pond hasn't dried, it's going to dry down in September. And then I've got a little gasoline pump with a hose on it. I just throw it down in there and pump the water over the dam and drain it the rest of the way. Again, break the cycle, and then it fills back up in a couple of weeks, and we're good to go. So not very deep. That pond there is half done. What you see is as deep as it's going to get. And I should have thrown a picture, and it's full of water sitting there right now, full of tadpoles. It's ready to go. Still there.
But not bullfrog tadpoles. Some other types of
Correct. Yeah, because this is the first year. This one we just did this last fall. So.
Yeah, this next slide's pretty impressive. I got a sneak peek at these slides, and this hand dug pond's pretty impressive, John.
I like the bandana.
let me come back a second. There's something I need to tell you. I got about that last slide. Digging ponds, the first thing you got to do is you got to check with the authorities again before you do stuff like this.
Oh,
because I've got a buddy in Washington, and he couldn't even dig a pond like this without yards and yards of paperwork. So different places in the country have way different rules, you know, and can you build a wetland? And if you do, exactly how it's constructed and all that kind of stuff. And Indiana is not that restrictive yet. It will be, but I'm doing a good thing. I mean, I'm making wetland habitat, and we don't have enough of that. So, but again, let me stress all the way through here. You need to be sure you're doing it legal. Otherwise, you don't want to get into trouble.
We stress that. We answer a lot of questions on Facebook, John, and we stress that in every aspect of what we talk about, whether it's, you know, herbicide use, fish stocking, dam building, whatever it is. I mean, obviously, most of the eastern United States, you know, from y'all's area down to the southeast is quite similar, but you get into the northeast and especially the northwest, and rules and laws change considerably. So you got to be, we always stress that. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yep. I didn't want to forget that. Yeah. So here you go. So I said there were 44 wetlands altogether now. Well, 20 of those I built with a machine or dug with a machine. The first 10 were with bulldozers, and another 10 with a little mini excavator. The other 24 I dug myself. So, you know, some people spend money and go into a gym and, you know, sit there bored as heck and, you know, spin on a bike or something. And so this is what I do for exercise. You know, this was the bottom of a kind of a ravine, small ravine, but you can see what I excavated, and I built the dam that's behind me there. And this was deep in the woods. You can see the trees there. There's no way you could get equipment in where I am here except a shovel. And so, you know, a pond like this might take me 2 months to dig in the summer, go out a couple hours every morning, but good exercise and, you know, helps the environment. So, anyway.
Where do you put all the dirt? I mean, is all the dirt in the dam?
Yep, that's all the dirt that came out of that. Yeah.
You had to carry it each shovel at a time. I mean, look
No,
at that.
I don't carry it. I throw it.
Yeah, look at this. He's got a sleeveless shirt on, and you can see his guns. So,
and that's not 2 feet deep. That looks like water depth is about 4 feet deep.
Yeah, no, this one is. You can see the overflow. That black circle there is the pipe going out. This one, just because of where it was configured and all that sort of thing, it was deeper and narrower and steeper than I would choose. But water ran down here and it was eroding, and so I wanted to stop the erosion, and also wanted to, you know, create some amphibian habitat. And it works just fine. I just checked it a couple weeks ago, or not, a couple days ago, and it's full of tadpoles. So it's good to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, and this is what I think is cool, is how many critters can live in such a small area. I mean, these ponds are sometimes like 10 feet wide, 15 feet wide by 20 feet long.
Yep. We'll go to the next picture. Go to the next picture.
Yeah.
So there's one that I dug 2 years ago in process. And you can see it's you know, it's about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet deep, and I still have that center section to finish up in this picture. And I just threw the dirt over to the right to make the kind of a rim around there, and you know, shallow pond, but and this is more typical of the ponds that I've hand dug. So it's not that much work.
It's just basically a circle, and that's at 25 feet wide, and then it has a little island.
He said it's not that much work. That's a lot of work, but I don't need any clients to see these pictures.
Yeah, I was a ditch digger in a former life, and so or a well digger or something.
You were a good one.
But I you know, it's one of those things where, you know, the stress of daylight, you know, everything going on in your life. I go out there and start digging. I kind of go into a zone, and I just shovel and shovel. And it's like boring, but it's good exercise, you know.
Yep. So what is this? About 25 feet. It's kind of a round pond, and then it has a little island.
It's probably 20 feet across there, and it probably from the front to the back here, maybe 25 feet. So, and then again, what I said, I want to try to get them so they dry up in the middle of summer. Sometimes I've dug a few of these, like this one was up on a ridge back in the woods, back in the backwoods, and there's lots of habitat. See, the habitat is beautiful, but there's no amphibians there because there's no wetlands. So I went and I dug a pond up on top of the ridge. It was good clay soil. I thought, oh, this would be great. It wouldn't hold water. You know, it fill up with rain, and then, you know, 3, 4, 5 days later, it would all soak into the ground. And so sometimes I cheat. And this has got a liner. You can see the liner that I had just put in here, and then I cover up the rim of the liner, just like a pond in your yard. You know, you guys have probably talked about, you know, ornamental ponds, and it works just the same way. Amphibians just go crazy in these things.
Huh.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
I will say that when I was 12 years old, John, my 12th to 13th, I started digging, thought I was going to dig a pond. And we still have that little crater in my dad's bank of desk. It holds water for about a week, and then big trees sticking out of it right now. I need to take a picture of that, but there's nothing. But
yeah. Well, here's a couple of pictures. Here's a pond that I did with a mini excavator. You can see at the top, that was like, you know, 2 weeks after we finished. The rains came and put some water in it, 2014, and then 5 years later, you can see what it looks like down below. And it dries up every summer. You can see the sticks and branches that I pile up in there. So if there's a dead tree or I got to cut down an ash tree, I'll pile those in the basin, because that's what the amphibians use to attach their eggs to. So and hide in. So there's a purpose to that little brush pile.
So you actually cut the limbs or the brushy parts of the trees, the part you're not using for firewood, and then throw all that brush back into the bottom of the pond. And because the amphibians have an egg mass, like a lot of times a gelatinous goo that they need to attach to something, and they'll attach to that. Am I speaking correctly?
Yep, that's absolutely right. And then so I can go around pretty quickly, like at night with a flashlight, and just check out the ponds, and a month ago now, and just look down in the water, and you can see who all's laid eggs in there, who's going to be successful this year, and that sort of thing.
That's pretty neat. I love it.
And I think there's one more series. Yeah. So here's one, the upper left there. This is one of those initial bulldozed ones, but you can see how wide open it is, and then you can follow it through time. Trees are huge around there, and now it dries up. The bottom two pictures are during dry season, which is just fine. And they fill up in November. When the November rains come every year, everything fills up right up to the brim, and it's there ready for the next spring.
Look at how awesome in that 2018 picture, how good that canopy is opening up underneath the trees. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so you have a couple shots here from 2001, 2006, 2011, 2018. Just a forced succession from small trees that are only 2 feet tall to 2018. They're 40 feet tall, 23 years later. It's amazing how fast forced and how it changed in just a short amount of time, I think.
Yeah, me too.
It's true. They grow pretty fast, but I've got some other colleagues around here in this same area that have done some tree planting on good land, much better soils.
Yeah.
And their trees are 60 feet tall. So I'm saying, darn, I want to see these trees I'm not going to live long enough. I want to see them 100 feet tall. But anyway, so right. You guys will have to come over and check it out 30, right. 40, 50 years from now and see if it works.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid I won't be here either.
Well, I should add one more thing. I said, I put all these wetlands in for amphibians, and, they say if you build it, they will come. Well, they will, but it'll take them a long time. I mean, there literally were no toads, no leopard frogs, no spring peepers, nothing in these ponds when I started. And now we've got, this is just a small subset of the things that are there now, let me.
Wait, hold on. Before you play that, I want to go over that. I want to do a summary on those ponds that, because this is where the fun starts to begin and seeing all these critters. There's that, but it's basically you're digging ponds. It doesn't matter how big they are. They could be 10 feet. Or they could be a quarter acre. You did them 2 to 3 feet deep, but your purpose was to have them dry at least once every 2 years to get rid of basically a lot of predators. And that's all you need, really, right? It's pretty amazing. That's how simple it is. And then, and then basically, when this is done that correctly that way, then you get this basically this, which I was surprised because Troy, I was in the woods all grown up, but I have never truly understood. This is like a whole nother form of like life that a whole nother part of the woods I've never even seen before. Because these frogs, when I started going out with John, we were out to one place, and then it was literally, if I was standing, 2 feet away, it was so loud you would have to shout at the next person to get them because of all these calls and everything, and just the songs and all these. I had no idea how many salamanders lived in my part of my neck of the woods. It was
well, it's awesome. And look, one of our favorite springtime things is obviously listening to spring peepers off the porch, which I'm assuming I'm confident spring peepers, but I think John may teach me different here in just a minute.
That's right.
Should I play a song?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with it.
Okay. Can you hear it?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And that's
Pseudocris crucifer?
Yes, the names keep changing, which is a problem. Pseudacris crucifer. It used to be Hyla crucifer, and now it's Pseudacris. So yeah.
So it used to be in the same genus as the tree frog, the gray tree frog.
As the tree frog, and actually, the graphic that's up here, the gray tree frog. 2 years ago, they changed the genus name to Dryophytes. So that's changed. The American toad in the lower right used to be Bufo americanus. Now it's Anaxyrus. The leopard frog on the top used to be Ranipipiens. Now it's Lithobates pipiens. I mean, it's like crazy. All these names. I memorized all these scientific names when I was younger, and now I gotta learn all these new names.
I get it.
It's a pain. I'm gonna see. Let's see. May.
But then the spring peeper, which you just played, it is very, very loud and very similar to the chorus frog, but it's not very big. It's about as big as a dime.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, no, max 3/4 of an inch maximum, and loud as heck. So let's see here. I think I got March 6th of May. I want to play. Spring peepers are done now, so there's a series of things that you start off with the spring peepers, and wood frogs go then. Then as time goes on a little bit, you start to get the American toads. Then we're about to start with the gray tree frogs, and so here's a gray tree frog. Well, actually a chorus.
Yeah, and you always tell a tree frog because the summer's starting to begin, right?
Yep. It's, in fact, they normally they're going by now. They've been calling from the trees. They want the water badly, but we're in kind of a drought right now, and the ponds are down, and it's real dry, and they're still calling from the tree. They have not had a good breeding chorus yet, and it's getting late. But I mean, they will. But yeah, once they go, summer's coming. And so this coming weekend, we're supposed to get to have a bunch of rain and get up to about 80. They're going to go nuts this weekend. So I'm looking forward to that.
Right. And then the leopard frog, which is it's the one you want if you're ever in a frog race, because they jump so high, right? They're the one that jump like 4 feet tall, got stripes down their back. And then their calls, you told me it sounds like a old man snoring.
Well,
right?
It's a snoring. Some people have described it as I can't make the sound, but like taking a balloon and rubbing your hand across a balloon. or other people have said it sounds like you're like a guttural noise out of the bottom of your throat. But I can't do it, but you can go online and you can go on the internet and get the calls of all these things.
Troy can do it. I've heard him.
I'm not trying it right now.
All right, that's what he sounds like if he doesn't get his sun drop.
That's right. That's right. That's very important. Very important.
So if you go to the next one, you can see these are frogs and toads, and obviously bunches of those. But there's also a bunch of salamanders that,
this
again,
is incredible.
as Matt said, most people don't even know these things are around here because you never see them. They're underground in mole tunnels and that sort of thing. Except for a couple, like one time of the year, they come to the pond to breed. And when they come in incredible numbers. I mean, we'll have in the springtime, like that spotted salamander in the lower right, a beautiful salamander. We'll get 400, at some of these ponds here, I put up some little fences, and we'll get 400 of them a night coming in. Just incredible numbers. And
That's
all of
amazing.
these things you can find in the same ponds, tiger salamanders and smallmouth salamanders. But again, most people around here don't see them. And so for maybe 2 nights in, early March, 2 nights a year, they just en masse move to the ponds during a warm rain. If it gets over 50 degrees and starts to rain at night, these guys just leave the forest, literally come up out of the ground like earthworms and migrate to the ponds, do their thing 2 nights, and then they're gone. And you're not going to see them the rest of the year. Well, you might turn over a log or something and be lucky enough to see one in the summer, but rare. But hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them during those 2 nights. Pretty spectacular.
Yeah, the marbled salamander, which is a black salamander and has gray, like somebody spray painted silver on those back. It'll actually come in the fall. That's the only one.
That's the only one. It's a real unusual one. It comes when those ponds are dry. That's another reason why I like those ephemeral ponds, because in early September, those ponds are at their lowest, and we'll get a light rain. In September we don't have much rain, but when we get just one of those little light, 1/1500ths of an inch of rain, these guys come out of the woodwork, head to the pond, and they crawl around on the bottom of the wet leaves in that empty pond, and they mate. And the female, then she lays about 100 eggs, and she kind of makes a little burrow under some leaf litter in the bottom of the pond, curls around those 100 eggs, and just broods those eggs. It's really unusual. She broods them, keeps them safe until like November, December, when the rains finally come. And when the rain fills up the pond, she heads off to the forest, and the eggs hatch, and those little larvae, they get the whole winter to themselves. They get the pond to themselves. So they eat all the mosquito larvae all winter, all the other stuff, little crustaceans and, those kinds of little insects that are there. And they get a jump on all those other salamanders in the spring because they've been growing a little bit all winter. So.
Yeah, I take my kids down to see John in September, and then we flip up all these wooden squares that are laid on the ground, and they just go bananas over all the salamanders and critters they get to catch. And little Abraham, who's 3, he's gonna have a field day this year. He's gonna love it. He's gonna love it. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, the salamanders are really neat. But I remember, even like I was saying, for the first time shining my light into one of these, like what I call just a mud hole, and just the life, just the critters that would be swimming around in there, and
right.
And then the noise and the sounds is just really, really, it was really kind of cool.
It's really, I bring the students, over for all the years, I bring them out here, and again, it's the same thing. They cannot believe it. Like, this is not real. This is like, this is some kind of fake thing. I don't know, but it's pretty spectacular. While these turtles are on here, I might add that those amphibians, I sped up the process back there in the mid-90s when I first built those ponds. I could have waited for things to come, and they would have come eventually, but it would have taken a long time, and I probably would have had a lot of mosquitoes in the interim. So what I did is I went to nearby ponds, you know, not on the property, and grabbed egg masses. So I'd go get some leopard frogs from, you know, down the road, get an egg mass and bring the egg mass back and seed the pond, so to speak. So I kind of got a jump on the colonization. And so, I mean, I did that for a couple of years, and now it just took off. I mean, if I dig a new pond now, there's so many ponds, somebody finds it the first year. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it hasn't even,
that is incredible.
It's a bare dirt hole, and it's full of water, and they're in there breeding. So, but we've also got turtles, snapping turtles.
I'm going to ask you the question that each of us get asked a million times. If I get turtles in my pond, is it going to hurt my fish?
Turtles will eat fish. Well, some turtles will eat fish. Snapping turtles, of course, will eat fish, but they're not fast enough to catch healthy fish. You've got a fish that's dead, injured, you know, something else, you know, some bass got part of it, or, you know, something happened, some bird pecked it and it dropped it. So they're scavengers. They're going to get mostly dead stuff or injured stuff. So I don't have any problem. Turtles are not going to hurt your pond. My pond here, you can see the painted turtles that are sitting on that floating basking log I put out there. I've got 1 million turtles in the pond that has fish in it, and it is full of fish. I mean, you can go out there anytime you want and catch a half a dozen bass in an hour and have a lot of fun. But it's loaded with turtles, and they don't have any impact. Most of the turtles are vegetarian. The painted turtles are vegetarian. The little turtle in the upper right is only like 3 or 4 inches long. It's a stink pot or a musk turtle. They eat little snails and stuff, so they're benign. They don't hurt anything. And then the lower right, I've got box turtles, and they love the wetlands. They come out to the wetlands in the summer when it's dry, and they can lay down in the shallow water and hydrate. And occasionally I catch them nesting, and this is a nest. I caught the female, or saw the female laying her eggs, and so I covered it up with wire, the nest, so predators wouldn't get it. And then that fall, these guys came crawling out. So it's kind of fun.
That's really, I love that. That's really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the questions, Matt, I get too. I mean, we have people every year wanting to buy turtle traps, and I don't think they do a whole lot of good, but it's good to know that there's not a real concern there. I can
yeah, if somebody's afraid, you know, I've been in water half my life, and I've never been bit by a snapping turtle underwater. That's another thing. People are afraid that, oh, if there's a snapper in there, I'm going to get bit. And I have stepped on snappers in the water, and they just want to get away. It's when you take them out of the water that they start getting really nasty. So, yeah. And I like turtles. So, well, hey, I mentioned that all those numbers of salamanders and frogs and stuff moving into the ponds. Since I'm a biologist, one of the things I do, and I kind of do this for students to show the students in labs for classes, is I'll put up this fence in the spring, usually in late February. They're just cinder blocks, you know, 4-inch concrete blocks.
So it's not a fence at all. It's just a laid up
it's
cinder
just a
block
line.
back to back to back. Yeah.
And then I sink in there some cottage cheese containers right where those little bricks are. And then the bricks kind of force the salamander to go between the bricks and the wall, and then they fall in the bucket. And then those nights I line up students to come out from different classes, and then they help me, you know, catch them, take them out, count them, sex them, and let them go in the pond. You can see this particular pond right here off to the side is a little bit low at this point. But if you go to the next picture, you can see what those buckets look like. So it's like Christmas time. You walk along the fence and you look down the bucket, and there's just dozens and dozens of things of all kinds and colors and shapes. And so it's great fun to do that. Particularly when it's
and all the buckets will have like that many in there?
Oh, sometimes way more than that. Sometimes they'll be 4 or 5 inches deep in the bottom of one of those the tall Cool Whip or cottage cheese, I guess, probably what they are.
So what you have is a wall but every 20 feet or so, you have a little opening with a little buried cottage cheese in there. They hit the wall, then they go vertical, and then they think they have an opening to get to the pond, and then plunk, they fall into the cottage cheese container. And then your image
That's
here
great.
is about a cottage cheese container filled about halfway up with like 4 different types of salamanders, a newt and spotted salamanders, which are beautiful yellow spots on them. And what is it, Jefferson?
Yeah, there's Jeffersons in there, and I see there's a smallmouth.
Yeah, smallmouth
so
was another one. So yeah, all those guys are hitting this pond all at the same time under these optimal days. Talking about a rush.
Yeah, and you gotta be careful where you're walking, because there's so many of them. The ground is littered with them. I mean, it's a crazy experience.
But it's in the middle of the night and it's like 50 degrees, Troy. So it's like you're bundled up. It's like the worst time you'd think would be possible to go out, that you would ever want to go out into the woods. So it's like first 50-degree rain. So you're bundled up in all these clothes, and you got this gigantic flashlight at midnight, 2 in the morning, running around at these ponds, the time that you'd never have been out there. And this is going on. And
well, look, I'm doing that. Look, I'm doing it next spring. I mean, it's
you
so
will
the first 50 degree range, what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, better if it's more than that. I mean, if you just get a rain in the middle of the night and it's 50, you'll get a few things. But usually, you know how the spring goes on, and you'll have one of those. I mean, maybe it gets to 60 degrees, and then it starts in the evening with rain, and then by morning it's turned to snow. Those are the nights, like in March, when that happens. It's craziness. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's Katie bar the door. It's pretty amazing. And then you've actually, worked with so many daggum turtles. You actually have a numbering system that I was telling Troy about this. You can actually carve on the shell of a turtle and mark it. So like on this, you put a notch on this particular part of the shell. This on the belly, this is the 100. So you know if it's 1,142, and then you can actually see that turtle grow for years and years and years.
Yep.
So
and
that, right?
Yeah, my both my turtle studies in western Nebraska and my iguana studies in the Bahamas have been ongoing since 1980. So like in Nebraska, we're still catching turtles that we caught in like 1980, 1981. We caught them then as full adults. They were completely old, they're old, smooth adult turtles. We're still catching them. That's 40 years later. So they had to be at least 20 back then. So I know they're more than 60 now.
That's amazing.
Anyway, so it's cool to catch the same turtle, and you take the data along with you and you look it up. Oh my gosh, yeah, we got this guy when he was 3/4 of an inch long back in 1983, and now he's he or she's a full adult. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, talk about turtles. Turtles actually lay their eggs in like June or July. The turtles babies will hatch, Troy, over the summer, correct me if I'm wrong, and then go through the winter with them in the ground. They don't come out until the next spring, right?
So that's painted turtles. So yeah, snapping turtles, soft shell turtles, box turtles, they come out in the fall. But painted turtles and red-eared sliders, if you know red-eared sliders, and map turtles, at least the northern map turtle that's up here, they do what Matt said. They lay the eggs just like everybody else. The eggs hatch in like August, it depends on when they were laid, but maybe early September. And then those little guys stay in the nest chamber. They're out of the eggs. They're just staying there all winter long. And so what that means is, like, they do this out in western Nebraska as well. And we put data loggers with them, and those nest temperatures in a typical winter out there, right inside among those little babies,
It froze a little
down
bit.
to 14, 15, 16 degrees Fahrenheit. The turtles, those little babies, do not freeze. Okay, if they freeze, they're dead. So like if we've dug those nests, some of those nests open in the winter, not knowing, as soon as you open the nest and some of that humidity gets down on them, bingo, they freeze and they're dead. but
Wow.
it's a process called supercooling, and it's not clear how they're doing this. But basically, the ice crystal formation doesn't happen, and so as a result, they're protected. Again, we don't exactly understand how they're doing this, but that means that then when spring comes, things get warmed and they dig out, and so they're digging out right now. Over the last month, the little painted turtles are digging out.
Some of the coolest memories I have as a kid, we used to go, my godfather and godmother were one of the first 5 permanent residents on St. George's Island, just off of Apalachicola. And he was the head marine biologist from Apalachicola Bay down to Crystal River. And I would go down every summer and I would go to work with him, and he would take me out, and they would look for turtle crawls on the beach on St. George's and Little St. George's Island. And I'd get to help him. They'd go out, they would find them, they would look for the false crawls, and then out of each nest, they would have to take one egg, and you couldn't roll the egg, and it was this whole very fragile deal we had to do. And we had this old Latin long monitor that you'd have to walk down to the ocean and walk back, and it would give you your Latin long. We had to record all that. It was just a very, very cool process as a kid. It was really, for a long time, that one thing that made me want to be a marine biologist for years and years and years. But very, very neat stuff.
Yeah, pretty cool.
But also, to add to that, certain turtles it depends on where they are in the nest, will determine if they're male or female, right?
The temperature,
most of the turtles, and particularly North America, most of the turtles, the sex is determined by the temperature in the nest during the middle third of incubation. So if it's a warm nest, if it's about, say, 82 Fahrenheit or above, it becomes a female. If it's less than that, it's a male. And so, if it's a shady spot, it's going to be all males. If it's a sunny spot, it's going to be all females. Of course, that varies with how warm the year is or how cold the year is and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, sex is determined by temperature, which is pretty. So
they're like on a sea turtle, because they're in that column, the ones on the bottom would typically be males then, correct?
Yeah. There's been some work done on sea turtles, as well as snapping turtles lay a lot of eggs too. And the same thing happens. Up in the warm top of the nest, you get some females. In the middle, you get 50-50. In the bottom, you can get males. The thing is turtles live so long that even if you had a hot year and all females are produced, or you got a cold year and all males are produced, they live so darn long that over 50, 60, 70, 100 years, it's all going to even out, so to speak. Well, that used to be the case. I don't know. With climate change now, as we know, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I went all over with John, and then you actually took me to the Bahamas. But then, Troy, you got an interesting story that you actually sprayed some weeds in Bahamas, right?
Yeah. So we were called back in I guess 2009. The Bahamian government had become concerned on Greater Exuma, John, your stomping ground, concerned with malaria issues. They had some inland lagoons that had an aquatic vegetation known as Rupia maritima, widgeon grass, and it had created breeding habitat for mosquitoes, and so they wanted to ramp up their vector control program to include aquatic vegetation control, and we were hired to give them their first aquatic plant management short course. We went down, we sold them an airboat, taught them how to apply herbicides properly. We used fluoridone sonar at the time to control the widgeon grass, and it worked well. I think they still have that airboat, and they hopped that airboat from island to island to use it for different scenarios and in different lagoons on different islands. So,
and that was Great Exuma, the main island of Great Exuma.
Georgetown, yeah, we stayed just outside of Georgetown, Greater Exuma, and we actually went back. We took our kids 2 years ago to Greater Exuma and stayed north of Georgetown a ways, probably 20 miles, probably closer to the airport. But just a fabulous look, incredible island down there. So,
yeah. Well, here's a small world scenario. Right now, tonight, I'm supposed to be on a boat anchored off Georgetown. I was supposed to fly to Georgetown at 6 a.m. this morning, go down there, meet some other folks, and we were going to go do iguanas chase iguanas for the next 10 or till 2 weeks. And of course, that all collapsed with the coronavirus. So yeah, I'm.
I want to go. I want to go the next time you go and chase iguanas with you.
It is pretty fun. That's what I got to do when I was down there. So we'll wrap it up. I got a little something here that has the sounds of all the frogs in different times of the year. It's put on by the Natural History Museum. So I'll try to conclude here. We'll wrap things up, but I want you to hear. This is different. I'll try to say the months as you hear the frogs, and I'll pause it. So that's March, April.
Oh, I was going to identify the frogs for you. Those were leopard frogs.
Right. That's May, June, July. Now we're getting the bold green frogs. Yeah. That's what you're. If you had a ephemeral pond, this is your year. May, June, July, August.
That's cool.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
That's cool. It kind of crunches all of what we said together into 1 year and in a couple seconds. So, well, John, hey, we better wrap it up. But this is pretty awesome. Thanks for coming.
All right,
John. Very, very good to meet you on your on the Zoom call, and hope to make it in person sometime in the near future.
Well, if you're up visiting Matt, come on over, and we'll look for some turtles and snakes and salamanders and things.
I love it. Sounds like a plan.
Thanks, guys.
All right. You guys be good. Be safe.
All right.
You too. Talk soon.
This podcast, Sitting Dockside, is brought to you by Private Water Natural Resource Association, a nonprofit built just to educate private pond and lake owners on water quality and fisheries and all of that good stuff. There's videos, there's places to read, and there's a community built right into that website. So if you want to learn more, jump to pwnra.org and click, and by all means, make sure that this continues in the future. Podcasts, education, video, become a member. If nothing else, there's tons of platforms. YouTube, Facebook. Just hit like, send a comment. We appreciate everything you can do here at PWNRA.